as far as I'm concerned, there's no obvious increased danger from the CCP having control over our access or our information, or even modifying the algorithm, than it is the alphabets of the world, or the metas of the world, or the CIA, or the FBI's of the world. Like, these people, as far as I'm concerned, the United States federal government is way more of an existential threat to me than the CCP. They actually have, like, I'm domiciled here. They have the ability to fine and tax and sanction and imprison me for, wrong think. Like, that's a way more clear and present danger.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to Bitcoin Audible. I am Guy Swan, the guy who has read more about Bitcoin than anybody else you know. And this show is brought to you by Swan Bitcoin and CoinKite. Swan Bitcoin is where you are going to buy, learn, and stack Bitcoin the right way as a Bitcoiner, and they're not going to be distracted with a bunch of crypto crap. And CoinKite is, you're going to get yourself a cold card hardware wallet, and you're going to be able to keep it safe. You're going to actually own it. And you're not going to have to worry about hackers and exchanges being insolvent and all of that nonsense, because you did it the right way. And those details and links and a discount code will be right there in the show notes for you. We have got an awesome chat today, which is very short and very reasonable and not at all passionate, ridiculous ranting between me and Clint Russell, our good friend from Liberty Lockdown. If you have not listened to the Liberty Lockdown podcast, it's been a little while, and I have not been able to catch up with him. But I love Clint. He's awesome, and he really blew up on the scene back in 2020 when he started the podcast, and he's been absolutely killing it. And if you are even slightly in the libertarian camp, you need to be listening to this show. You need to be listening to Clint. You probably also may know him from Timcast, which he's up there all the time, and then we are Change, or the best political show with Luke Radowski on Rumble. So all those links and stuff will be in the show notes to check out. But we have just an awesome conversation. So without further ado, this is Bitcoin Audible Chat 94. Pessimism, optimism, and rational, passionate ranting with Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown, and let's get into it. Well, how you doing, man? Welcome back to Bitcoin Audible. It's been a minute. What's been going on? Catch me up. What's Clint up to?
Yeah, so first, obviously, I started a show with Luke Radowski and Steph. We do kind of a Timcast IRL South in Miami. Called The Best Political Show. We signed a deal with Rumble. We started November 1st, and we've had on a bunch of great guests. Probably the most surreal for me was sitting right next to Vivek Ramaswamy and, chopping it up for over an hour, and like lots of really, really, really high profile guests. And it's going to get way crazier in the not too distant future, because we've got a crazy lineup coming up. So that's probably been the biggest change. Why that would be the first thing I list, and not the fact that I'm running for the vice presidency of the United States and the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is still in the building phases, if you will. So obviously that's less of a commitment than doing a show 5 days a week. But yeah, those are the main things. Still doing Liberty Lockdown, still reading and learning about Bitcoin, and much of my journey has been assisted by you. I probably wouldn't own much if it weren't for you. So I appreciate that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's about it, man.
Doing my part to make sure that all the anarchists keep their financial shit straight.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know you signed a deal with Rumble, actually. I don't think I quite realized that. I just have it saved in my Rumble stuff, which I have found myself slowly going over there more and more. Which is cool. Because it's one of those things where you say, it's easy to pontificate. It's easy to say, I value this, that, or the other, but then it's also really easy to just go back to YouTube and then go bitch about YouTube, and 100%. I've found myself gravitating more and more to actually using Rumble, which is kind of exciting. Same way that I've noticed this with going to Noster is I actually go to Noster first before Twitter in my 1 hour of allotment on my phone for social media apps. Noster takes up more of it now than Twitter does, which
That's
is
great.
also like a good thing. In fact, are you on Noster? Have you explored that at all? I'm not even sure.
I when I first heard about it like a year ago, I looked at it and I was like, I'm too old to figure this out. So I'm still working on it, man. Just the same way with Bitcoin when I was like, I heard about it 10 years ago and I laughed it off or felt like, oh, this is, I don't get this. This is too complicated. I'm too lazy to be technologically like on par at this point. But I'm also very busy. So it's like,
it's busy. It's busy is all. It really, it all comes down to busy, because when you're technically inclined, you're more likely to just kind of go grab a little project like that and like dig into it. Whereas if it's kind of lower in your hierarchy of like, I don't want to fight with this, as opposed to I don't want to play with this. Like it's the same thing with a bunch of the AI tools or whatever that I'm digging into. It just kind of ends up getting put down on the 4th and 5th. And every single day I'll have it on my schedule. It's like, all right, when I get a minute to sit down at the end of the night, I'm going to start playing with this or see if I can set this up. And then 2 weeks of, Rad not sleeping well or, this, that, or the other later, I haven't touched it, So that's how it goes.
No, that's how it works, man. But I know it's kind of a brave new world. You got a lot of new innovations and technologies, some of which are obviously very concerning. But like as with everything with technology, it's always a double-edged sword. And I know that there's a bunch of incredible entrepreneurs that are trying to build us some safe havens. So I do try and adopt and adapt to the newest technologies, but I'm also constantly trying to build out my show and brand and everything else, and it's just like you gotta find that balance.
Actually, on that, you how far you said you commute there? How far is that? Like, how close are you to where you're doing the thing with Luke?
We're very close, but Miami traffic makes it upwards of a half an hour commute most days, just because we start at 6 Eastern, 6 p.m. Eastern, and that's like heart of rush hour. So but yeah, we're very close. I'm certainly not complaining about the distance. I got a new Corvette, so I still haven't put or I just put on my 6,000th mile on this car, and I've owned it for over 2 years. So I do not drive very much.
Yeah. That's kind of the right way. The right way to do a Corvette. Get it last. Let it last.
Exactly. Well, it's like a collector's item too. So I'm definitely. I'm retaining is maximum value. Not as much as my Bitcoin, but I'm doing pretty well.
You finance things like that, right? You finance and you just keep the Bitcoin.
It's true, I do actually. Which I know. What's the name of that guy? The financial advisor that's very famous that says never ever take debt.
Yeah, which is the worst strategy in the fiat world ever. Like he's applying 1950s money to today, and I think it's a terrible strategy. You never take debt denominated in Bitcoin. Yes, sound money, never take debt.
Yes. Well, see the issue. Ramsey is his
Ramsey.
name.
Thank you. Yes,
I was going to drive me crazy. The issue is that most people aren't disciplined enough to take out low yielding debt to then invest it into something that's more productive, or even something that's more sound. So I understand the advice to the broad audience. Like I think that might actually be prudent. Just never take debt.
Yeah.
But I've made an entire career out of taking debt and basically seeing arbitrage opportunities and investing in that fashion so that the return is greater than the cost. And it's like that's a total business plan in the fiat system.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's don't take out consumer debt. So don't take out like rotting fiat debt to get even faster rotting consumer goods.
Yes.
Don't take out debt to eat a sandwich.
Yep. That's a better advice. I mean, like no one should be buying a house at these price levels.
Yeah.
Literally
crazy.
Nobody. And certainly no one should have been buying a house in the start of 2020 but it was actually, in hindsight, a fantastic investment.
Yeah.
Because it probably would have doubled for you.
Yeah.
I mean, the world is just so upside down. I totally led my audience astray, telling them, to get out of real estate because with the lockdowns happening, I expected there to be, basically a depression because there
commercial got obliterated, but not residential. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But there should have been a depression, but instead they printed, $5-6 trillion that year, and it was like, oh, we didn't even have a shutdown. The economy's totally fine. Wink, wink.
Did you see my video on that, by the way? I've gotten a lot of good feedback on the $6 trillion thing.
Oh yeah, no, I did actually.
Oh, yep. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
It's so ridiculous.
Think that it's really important that people understand the truth of these numbers because as you described, it's very hard for people to process. I mean, it's even hard. Like, I'm a finance guy. I've been doing this my entire life, basically. It's still hard for me to process, like $34 trillion in debt. And then you add on top of that, all the unfunded liabilities, which probably pushes us up to 100 trillion. And then you add onto that consumer debt, and then you add into that corporate debt and state municipal. And then, it's just, the debt is quintillions of different currencies all competing with one another simultaneously as you have a debased currency, and you also have printing and borrowing that's happening in all of these other nations. And it's like, this is a extraordinarily hard time to analyze investing. I mean, This is why I became convinced that Bitcoin was a good lane to be in, because I was like, you need a life reserve or life preserver.
There's so much systemic risk. So much systemic risk, and they don't know how to mitigate or even think about the systemic risk. Like it's something that's not visible because they look at things within the framework of how things work, or like what the system is. They don't step out of the system and look like, oh wow, the whole thing is just kind of like horribly lopsided, like, and something's gonna fall off. Like something's gonna break off of this thing, and it's gonna be sooner rather than later.
Well, this is why I shut down my mortgage company, is because I was a fiduciary. Like I had not just morally, but also civil liability wise. I was like, I can't in good conscience advise people on how to deploy their capital in this moment. It is so rife with risk everywhere you look. It's just what has less risk? Because like, even investing in Bitcoin, if I advise someone, a year and a half ago, they're going to hate me because like they bought in at 70. And now they'd be like, all right, we're good again. We can be friends again.
Clint wasn't that bad. He was a pretty cool guy.
I'm sure you always experience this, but like, people always ask me about investing in Bitcoin when it's at or near the all-time high in fiat terms.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've been like, when it got down to 15 6 months ago, I was telling people, I was saying like, this is if you don't own any, you should definitely own some.
Yeah.
And then, as soon as it gets back up to 70, people are like, hey, Clint, should I be buying this? And I'm like, well, I don't know. The entry point is pretty elevated. I'm not so sure right now. You might want to hold off a little bit.
What I do, and I've been telling people a lot this recently, just because I think it's important, especially in this zone, like where we are in kind of like chaos mode again, is if I tell people, as I am getting them into it, I tell them they almost universally, what do you think the price is going to do? Where do you think it's going to go? I tell them, if you are buying, the price is going to plummet. If you are selling, if you're trying to get out, the price is going to go up immediately after. And that's just how it is. And then be like, well, you don't know that. It's like, it doesn't matter. If you aren't planning for that to happen, you're going to be pissed off. You're going to be unhappy. Understand that you are buying something to own it. You are buying to own a money that is better. And it doesn't matter what the price does in the short term. You do not want to get rid of this today. In the same way that you wouldn't if you could buy stock in the internet in 1999. You don't care whether or not it plummets or goes up, because in 2024, you're going to want to own that same piece of the internet. It's going to be a whole hell of a lot more expensive. So just own it. Stop it. Like, good Lord, Stool, Presidente or whatever. God bless that guy. He's just like, I should have traded at this, at this, at this. Like, just own some. Just stop it. Stop trading the thing. It's going to kick you in the ass every time.
If you remember I think the first time or two, because I've had you on my show 6 or 7 times, the first time or two, I was like, where's this going price wise in US dollar terms? Like, if you noticed, last 4 times I've had you on, we don't talk about it at all.
Yeah.
Because that's not how I perceive it anymore. I do not trade it.
Yeah.
Period. Like, I don't. And what's really interesting is, I guess this is probably, very relatable to some in your audience that have been, longtime Bitcoiners, is that I no longer get excited when it's elevated. Like, I don't like I've had no emotional roller coaster whatsoever. I'm just like, it's going to go up, it's going to go down.
Yeah.
I own some. And I will always own some, and that's all there is to it. And it doesn't matter because I'm not trading. I'm not going to lighten up or go heavier. Like, none of that. It's just,
that is perfect.
I just have it.
That is exactly what you want. You do not want to feel exuberant when the price goes up or depressed when the price goes down, because it doesn't matter. You just own it. Love it.
When it dropped to 15, I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer, but that was it.
Kind of sucks. That's great. Well, since you said a recent episode was about TikTok, I want to talk about this, just because I haven't dug in. I've basically been assessing, I guess, the damage or the risk of this from basic common sense to the fact that we're talking about making a law about selling something. That right there, I don't really care what the bill says. That's a horrible idea. There's no way to clarify that Congress is trying to force the sale of something because they deem it a threat, that a company is a threat to the nation. I think that flat out, you don't have to give me any sort of messaging from the bill to clarify that. You don't need rules about that. There's nothing about Congress that should ever have anything to do with what's going on in that field. But anyway, but I have seen like excerpts and little things of like, this is what it means. But that's I'm pretty shallow level understanding. And as you said, you've kind of dug a little bit deeper into this. So I'm curious what your thoughts on it, what your take on the whole TikTok bill is.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, like, this is why I'm so at loggerheads with Tim Pool on this particular topic, and I'll be on IRL next Wednesday, so he and I are almost certainly going to come to blows over this. But I have a very similar, sensation when it comes to the federal government that Tim does. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't like basically any of the congressional representatives. The only people he does like are the Thomas Masseys of the world. Thomas Massey happens to be in my corner on this topic, so I find it fascinating that Tim is going along with a bill that's supported by Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Dan Crenshaw and all of the worst swamp monsters that have ever walked the face of the earth. And he's just like, I still want TikTok banned. And it's like, I get it, Tim. I don't like the cultural rot that we're witnessing. I certainly agree with you that it's quite evident that the viral nature of media, particularly to the young and, easily influenced, has been very deleterious. Like, you have seen more and more gender dysphoria that has been a product of products like this. And I understand his concerns, but I'm trying to, and I hope to be able to convince him that because you empower the federal government to force divestiture of the CCP, which, by the way, you can't prove out that they're actually modifying the algorithms to manipulate the Americans' minds, whereas it's to benefit the Chinese mind and all this stuff. Like, we don't know. We don't have the source code. It's just as easily plausible that the algorithm feeds you whatever the consumer is interested in. And in fact, the American audience is interested in a bunch of terrible stuff because we have a culture that is in decline. Yeah. I think that's really, really like a huge part of the problem that people don't want to look at, is that these kids come out of public school and they come out of academia and they've been told by their teachers that they ought to be questioning their gender. And then they log on to TikTok, they see some video of Dylan Mulvaney, they watch the entirety of it. The algorithm says, hey, this person likes that. All of a sudden, this is what their feed is 24/7. They happen to be dealing with depression and anxiety because they've been on psychotropic medication since they were 6 years old. And all of a sudden, they think that this is the solution to everything that ails. So that's the reason, in my opinion, that's a very plausible explanation as to why the youth of this country is so screwed up and becoming increasingly screwed up. So I think it's a mistake. I think really it's a mistake anytime you blame technology for the issues that broader culture is dealing with. Like, you have to get back to what conservatives always talk about, which is personal responsibility, being a good parent. How about you don't let your kid be on this thing 24/7? Why did you give your kid a smartphone at 11 years old? Like, I didn't have one until I was in my, almost adulthood. Like, come on, let's continue to hold up these alleged conservative values. Let's not turn to, daddy government and say, hey, fix this. I can't get my kid to put down the phone. So I think that's very frustrating. But the key here is that, and Justin Amash pointed this out, and I've got my own disagreements with Justin Amash when it came to Donald Trump, but he's certainly a true constitutionalist, and he pointed out that subsection C says a person subject to the direction or control of a foreign person or entity described in subparagraph A or B. And then subparagraph A or B is a foreign person that is domiciled in, is headquartered in, has its principal place of business in, or is organized under the laws of a foreign adversary country, or B, an entity with respect to which a foreign person or combination of foreign persons described in subparagraph A directly or indirectly owns at least a 20% stake. So the key here, though, the words that matter most, is that a person subject to the direction or control of a foreign person. Now, this is why
that's
I'm going to
arbitrary.
Yeah, it's too vague. And this is what I'm going to go to war with Tim on, is that we just witnessed the past 7 years. You still have pundits that are saying that Donald Trump is a conduit, a puppet of Vladimir Putin. Can you not easily envision a world in which they say Elon Musk, which just took on Saudi capital to purchase X or Twitter, he's under the influence of enemy capital because there's a 20% stake that's being held by some Russian oligarch. Now Elon has to either force a sale or it's banned in all of the app stores, because that's really how the law is enforced, is that it makes it so that cloud services cannot host this data if these rules are not upheld. So I think it's just a terrible precedent. It's in the by the straight reading of the bill, I can understand if you're completely mortified about TikTok, why you think that this is not going to lead to anything bad. But if you actually go back and you look at the NDAA, if you look at how the NSA came to be after World War II, if you look at the Patriot Act, if you look at the UAMF or AUMF, the authorized use for military force that was able to give George Bush and then every president since him, even though Osama bin Laden got assassinated in 2011, but we still have incredible executive powers that enable these people to basically circumvent the Constitution and circumvent the Bill of Rights and no longer have war declarations and no longer have to get warrants to spy on us through the FISA courts. Every single power you give them, it's always marketed. It's always, the pitch is always, we're going to protect, this is to protect you and to go after the enemies.
Yeah.
They perceive us to be their enemies, Tim. You have to realize that. Yeah. So that's going to be my counter argument. We'll see if I prevail.
Yeah, dude. It's so crazy, like, that I can't believe we haven't learned this lesson yet. Like, that, like, it seems so blatantly obvious. And if you just have, like, what did they do for 4 years? And it's so funny. It's so comical the way, like Trump was just a Russian agent for 4 years, and the election was illegitimate and it was stolen, and Russia influenced the election on it. Like, you don't think they would have gone after, you don't think they weren't begging for this exact sort of law in 2020? Yep. You don't think that in or 2016? You don't think they would have just got, like, just rolled over, just had a pop the champagne, like, we fucking did it. Now we can just shut all of this down. Trump is an agent of Russia without evidence. What it is it's execution without a trial. Is it saying that Congress, without going through the Justice Department without going through any like legitimate evidence. This is like one of those things, like we have all these like congressional hearings and people like bolster up like this is so important and we're having congressional hearings and the Congress is doing an investigation. There's no fundamental structure or rules that say that you actually have to see both sides of the argument, that anybody has to have a defense. It's a fucking parade. Like it's a show. It's reality TV. It's just Congress trying to give a public perception that what they're doing is some sort of science. It's some sort of like evidence gathering, but it's just them getting together and jerking each other off about a bunch of bullshit that they already think. And the conclusion to broadcast their conclusions about who the bad guy is so that they can build up public support to just pass whatever the hell law gives them full power to just start checking boxes and deleting companies and putting people in prison. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yes. This is the libertarian mind versus the people who haven't fully converted. It's totally true. Like, if you look at, well, first off, let me also add, and you may have to delete this depending on what programs you put it on, but Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL has been going on TV for the past couple months trying to advocate for a TikTok ban. And his explanation doesn't have anything to do with China, ladies and gentlemen. It has to do with the fact that the top trending topic on TikTok for 6 months now has been free Palestine. And the Jewish, not even the Jewish community, but the Zionist community very much doesn't appreciate that. And you've also seen tweets that have come out from official accounts that allegedly represent, different aspects of Israel that are advocating very strongly for a ban on TikTok because it has been a PR disaster for them. Yeah. Because tens of thousands of innocent people have died, and you've had viral footage that has been viral nonstop. And like, this is where the real influence is coming from. You cannot prove out the arguments about the manipulation of the algorithm. You cannot prove out the CCP is actually using this data to manipulate our minds or to spy on us, for that matter. You can't prove any of it. It's allegations. It's like none of it is provable, so they don't even try to. They're just trying to buffalo us. They're just trying to force feed it to us, just the same way they did with the CARES Act in 2020. If you look back at what happened to us because of that, because you have trillions of dollars that are just concocted into thin air, that it ultimately we now languish under the consequences of that. Every time you do anything in a rapid fashion, especially if it's bipartisan, you should be extraordinarily skeptical of their true intent. And I think there's no difference when it comes to this. No. And let me also add, assuming that they prevail and they get it to be banned, do you think that it's actually going to
make a difference?
Fix the mind of the children in America? Like, how naive could you be? Like, are you going to delete all social media? Because if you don't do that, you're just getting rid of one. And might I add, you're adding market share to the Facebooks of the world and the Instagrams of the world. And Mark Zuckerberg spent hundreds of billions of dollars to get Joe Biden elected, Tim. So what are we doing?
Dude, and it's such a disconnect. Like you said, or alluded to, is that like this isn't the source. TikTok is not the source of the cultural rot. It's just a consequence. It's an effect. So, if we,
just like Donald Trump,
if we ban rotten branches and don't even bother to look at the root and trunk of the tree, like all we're doing, like we're doing nothing that's relevant to the actual problem. We're literally just giving the power to government to just go chop stuff off of society whenever it decides that it's inconvenient for the regime. And
exactly
the idea that this won't be used, like, how could you not see? How could we have just gone through 2020? How could we have just gone through the last couple of years and you not see what the horrific consequences of this being permanently written into law is going to be? Like, this is just communism. It's just communism.
Yeah. Well, and let me also add, there was the Twitter leaks that proved that the DHS and the CDC and the FBI and the CIA and every three-letter agency was modifying the terms of service of these alleged private businesses in America to deplatform, censor, deboost, blacklist.
They weren't shadow banning. They were attention defocusing. Clint, I can't remember what the hell term they is, but it was, they lied so many times. They lied. It's like, we don't shadow ban. We won't shadow ban. We don't, and they just changed the term.
Yeah.
They just named it something else.
Whatever Orwellian newspeak, justification they give you, we all experienced it. We all lived through it. If you were on Twitter in 2020, as I was, we all know that we were running for our lives, trying not to get deleted. The fact that I didn't get deleted is a borderline miracle, because I was coming up with I basically created an entirely new lexicon, a new language, just to try and circumvent their censorious nonsense. So, look,
no, that was like common. Like you'd see, it's like, oh, the word changed. Oh, it's like now it's VAX. Oh, now it's
the V.
VAKINE. You know, like it just
right. So this is, I mean, and on top of that, Tim makes his living. I'm sorry, I keep circling back to Tim, but I'm prepping in my mind for this debate, this showdown. Tim makes his living on social media. Like, he is the type of content creator that the government would probably like to see gone. So, do you want to give them more tools to try and make that a potential future? Like, this is my major concern, is that we, because of the censorship that happened, it peaked in 2020 and 2021 when they were lying through their fucking teeth about everything.
Yeah.
But because of that, some upstarts, some acquisitions happened. Twitter became more free when it became X. Rumble obviously came about, and it's extraordinarily more free than being on YouTube. Like, these are the natural consequences of a censorious environment, and I'm very appreciative that they exist. Well, what who's to say that if Rumble gets into financial straits, and obviously their CEO, like, the company was founded in Canada, I don't think that they're going to classify Canada as one of the 5 enemy nations that you're not allowed to have capital from, but they could still make the argument that Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO of Rumble, is under the what was the language again? A person subject to the direction,
direct or indirect.
Yeah. He just subject to the direction or control of a foreign person. That is way too vague. All they have to do is make the same lie, just like they did with the Steele dossier with Donald Trump, or the FBI. I mean, the FBI spied on the sitting president. Stop giving them any new powers. Don't give them fucking any power ever. No.
We should not add one page of law.
Yes.
The only hope for this country is for the next 20 years is to just go through and delete pages. And we could do 1,000 pages a year, and we'd still have too much shit at the end of it. Like,
oh, dude,
like it just it would be like a dent. It would be like it reminds me of Dave Smith's stand up or whatever. Is that we're gonna pay off the debt. We're gonna put away $60 a day. Every day we're gonna pay it off.
Well, I mean, it's so true. If we were to delete 1,000 pages of law per day, I would still die, and we would live under the largest state in human history.
Yep, that's probably true. Yeah, like, you don't even have to look that up. That's probably true.
I'm just obviously spitballing, but I would imagine that's probably the case. So, look, we need major reforms, and honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm just like, it's all about, speaking of divestiture, I'm divesting myself of the fiat system. I'm divesting myself of the big tech oligarchs as best I can, and trying to build outside of it. But in the meantime, I'll be damned if I see people that I perceive to at least be somewhat of an ally advocate on behalf of more federal powers. I think it's a huge mistake, and we'll see who's right in hindsight. But I assure you, my track record is pretty good.
I was about to say, it doesn't. I think it's not even about your track record. It's just about, like, oh, you're going to give the government more power and they're going to abuse it. That's the easiest bet. I would never. I'd take 100 to 1 odds. I would take 100 to 1 odds.
I have more faith in that than I do Bitcoin.
Me too. Quantum computers could break it. You never know.
Exactly.
You will never break the government from abusing power. This is why I think technology is and always has been really the story of human progress. Like, it's about developing technology that alters the environment to disallow this. And I find it really interesting. There's been kind of a flood of new people in Nostr. And it's because TikTok has found Nostr, because a bunch of TikTokers are like, well, what the hell do we do? And now you have Now you actually have Bitcoiners building a censorship-resistant communication layer. And then you have things like Keat and Hole Punch and the peer-to-peer stuff, which I'm not sure if you know anything about that, but that's something that I've been really deep into. And I actually think where there's discussions about it right now, but I actually think I'm going to launch a kind of a show series that's dedicated to this, because I think it's like one of the least talked about, most important thing that's happening right now is the ability to have a dynamic. I mean, BitTorrent, right? File share.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the big problems with BitTorrent was, or the limitations with BitTorrent, is that it was static. Is when you made a movie file or shared some piece of information or a data, whatever it was static. For instance, I downloaded like the Wikipedia. Oh my God, the WikiLeaks database thing or whatever off of BitTorrent. But it was frozen in time from when they uploaded it, 2015 or something like that. So anything they added in 2016 wasn't there. And they couldn't update that. So let's say that gets like 1 million people downloading and seeding it. Well, if they make a new one for 2016, 2017, suddenly they have no seeders. Suddenly they have no network. Well, that static, because it was static, it couldn't be like a live web experience. Like you can obviously update a website. You can obviously update a video. You can obviously, update your network. Well, this has been able to build essentially a dynamic experience into the concept of the BitTorrent style network, the peer-to-peer system. And it is incredible. It's amazing. And I use it for all my business stuff. Like we all use Keat, which is a chat app built on top of this. But anyway, a little bit of a side note.
Let me just encourage you briefly to do that, please, because I listen to Bitcoin Audible. I would love to get educated on something. I do not have time to deep dive. So please do it.
Yeah. And Nostr is interesting too, because, and in fact, you said you were talking about how you don't have, it takes a lot of time to dig into it. You use Android or iPhone?
Android.
Okay, perfect. There is a client called Amethyst, and I'll send you a link if you want to check it out. But it's actually not something, especially with like the normal clients now, apps now or whatever. You don't really have to do anything now. Like the time to set it up is essentially you go make a key. You have to save your key. That's it. Like kind of like a Bitcoin key. It's not really any different. Write that shit down, store it somewhere, and create it. If you want to, I will literally send you the link. And happy to broadcast out that Clint got on Nostr. You should explore it whenever you've just got like a minute to screw around with something, because what Nostr does is it turns social media into a protocol rather than a platform, right? And the way that I think about it with like relays and stuff, because it can sound complicated, but I think the easiest way to think about it is kind of like podcasting, because a lot of people, especially you, like kind of knows what the podcasting environment is like, is that you can host it wherever you want. And when you take it somewhere else, your RSS feed has all of your followers, like everybody just finds you with your RSS feed. And if you update it,
that's massive.
You can just take it to a different host. So if one host tries to censor you, you just take it to Poditize. You just take it to Spotify. You just take it to...
So it's a social media RSS.
It's essentially a social media RSS. It's a protocol that just that separates it from the platform, and everything is just based on keys. And as long as you sign with your key, it will spread through the relay and user network, and the users who are interested in your key will just find your content.
Quick question. Does it work in reverse that, because I have 126,000 followers on X, does it transfer into that, or does it start from today?
It starts from today. It starts from there. It's completely new protocol. Just kind of like if somebody created email today and you started collecting email addresses, like it's got nothing to do with, any previous platform. So it is a bootstrapping thing. But the other good thing is, early on a network is usually massively beneficial for if it actually grows and continues to be successful. But
agreed.
I think it has a pretty strong future, specifically because of things like TikTok bills Like people are going to find out that this is necessary. This is not a wish to have. This is a need to have.
I agree.
And the more time goes on, the more that tends to be proven right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I basically I understood it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like once you get that ball finally moving, because it's like with
Mm-hmm.
social media, it's all about it's like the 0 to 1 phenomenon. I'm sure you've heard that in the business world as well.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
I got to 1, and now I did the impossible. Now I'm just like, let's keep this ball moving. So anytime I spend not pushing the ball, I feel like I'm not doing my job. But I
Mm-hmm.
like ultimately the ball can just be stolen from me. So I need to have an RSS for sure.
This show is brought to you by the Cold Card hardware wallet. My favorite setup, which I know I talk about a lot, is the Nunchuck wallet on mobile that just connects directly to or just talks NFC whenever I need to sign. The Nunchuck does not hold my keys. It is securely on my Cold Card, not connected to the internet, not vulnerable to a phishing email or any malware or anything like that. If I ever need to send a transaction, I just create the transaction on my Nunchuck wallet, and I tap it to my Cold Card, I hit sign, I tap it again, and then off it goes. There is no easier interface and way of interacting that grants a higher level of security, in my opinion, than that right there. It's genuinely incredible to me that we even have this capability in the Bitcoin space. And CoinKite has just made an entire suite of fascinating security and just fun Bitcoin devices and hardware products, like the block clock. Just connect it to your node and have it show the Bitcoin price, have it show the block height, just right there on your desk in this really cool package. If you haven't checked out what they have to offer, you definitely need to. And when you go over there, do not forget that I have a 9% discount code. Bitcoin Audible, all one word, gets you 9% off. And you can go through the link in the show notes or just remember the discount code, which is not hard. It's just the name of the show. You can go through the link in the show notes to go right there, or just go to the store, browse around, see what you want, get yourself a solid hardware wallet, experience the tap to send with a Cold Card hardware wallet. It's just kind of magical. And get notified for the Q1. I'm really stoked about my Cypherpunk BlackBerry, the new model that's going to be coming out. So check that out as well. Yeah, don't forget, 9% off. The link is right in the show notes. Go check them out. Yeah, it's funny. On Twitter, I remember too what it's crazy. It's crazy that you can just be clearly shadow banned, and I don't know if it's that support. Like maybe I was never actually talking to a real person. And I don't even mean to complain about this, like, oh, boo-hoo, I got shadow banned. But more just like how interesting it is to see the results and see how clear the manipulation is, and wonder what the second and third order effects are. Like what at what scale? Like I'm not like important on Twitter, but the fact that like I have like I just look at analytics or whatever, and like every month regularly I was like 2,000 3,000 new followers, and I kind of averaged that for like a year. I was like, oh wow, this is cool. People are growing, people are finding Bitcoin Audible, my account's growing. And I posted one post about VAERS and the data that was like fully verifiable, like nothing. It was a negative sounding post, but there was nothing untrue about what my statement, about what my post was. And immediately I started getting like DMs from time to time. It's like I think one of the first ones was like, did you ever respond to this? Like, I really want to hear your opinion on it. I'd be like, yeah, dude, I have like 3 posts under it. And then they screenshot, and they can't see any of my people who followed me and I follow them can't see my responses. And I was like, wait, shit. And then I looked at like my analytics or whatever. And like I said, it was like averaging 3,000 per month. Stopped dead for like 6 months. And I started getting like lose 20, lose 100, because there's an enormous amount of spam and fake accounts that probably just get cleared out. But like I was clearly being shadow banned. And so I, talked to support and all of this stuff. And they're like, we don't have a separate thing like this. We suggest you have more engaging content. And I'm like, that's not what this is about. I'm
No,
just, can you not just tell me? Like, they didn't even send me this is a bad post. We want you to remove this post. Like, they just kind of said nobody should see this account anymore. And I don't know where or what computer or what person it was there, but I had this. I always knew, and I would tell people about, like, you don't own your social media, you don't own this platform, you don't own your followers. If Twitter just went down or just decided that I was going to be banned, I would lose a massive network for connecting to the people who are interested or want to hear my content and my show.
totally. I'd basically become instantly irrelevant because
Yeah.
like I've spent no time building on Instagram. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
decent YouTube following, but it certainly if X were to ban me, YouTube would have banned me 6 months prior. So I mean, I just got let back
100%.
on YouTube
Yeah.
after my, I don't know, seventh or eighth strike that I've received over the past 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and every time I get up to two, I don't record over there for a month. So now I'm building on Rumble, and I've got, I'm approaching 10,000 subscribers on Rumble, and it's like it's all just a constant
It's
cat and mouse
borrowed.
game trying to stay ahead of the censorship. But
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced the shadow ban stuff that you're talking about myself, and I've been very fortunate in that since Elon purchased it, it seems as if I have not been shadow banned, and as a consequence of that, I've gone extraordinarily viral and probably doubled or tripled my following. But it's like before that, it was just basically banging my head into a wall, and it's very frustrating because it's like I haven't changed the quality of what I'm doing, but all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm
Yeah.
not growing. I'm not seeing the same type of responses and reach that I once had, and you were saying it seems as if maybe somebody over there did XYZ. It's like that's the thing. It doesn't have to be somebody. It's
Yeah.
just like algorithmically you can just have run afoul of some of their random parameters, and it may not even be Elon's at Elon's direction or at Linda Yaccarino's direction. It could just be old code. My good friend Josie the redhead libertarian, she got her account suspended for 12 hours just
Yeah.
a few weeks ago or a few days ago. She's
Oh,
followed
really?
by Elon Musk. He loves her,
Yeah.
but she got suspended for 12 hours, and she appealed it, and then they responded back to her and they said this was old code, that you said something that ran afoul of the old code, which still has not been deleted. I mean,
Wow.
it is just it's a mess.
Wow. Yeah, but that I remember thinking that, like, oh yeah, I tell people about all this, but I have not properly invested in a foot out. Like, I don't have a backup for this. Like, I'm still just relying this on my dominant network to connect to people and to DM people that like that are relevant in the Bitcoin space. That I want to have on the show or whatever. Like honestly, even you, I would be like, oh yeah, I'll just message them on Twitter. But if that was taken away from you, you're like, shit, how do I get up there with Clint?
I know, dude.
I guess I have an email around here somewhere.
No, that's so true. Like almost all of my communication happens through X at this point, and this is the other point I was trying to make is that like I have not built out other social media. Like I don't have like I have an Instagram. It's Liberty Lockdown if people want to follow me, but I hardly post over there because it's more of a look at me selfie type of platform, and I'm
Yeah.
an idea guy,
Yeah.
and X for me is really where it's at. YouTube obviously would be great if the algorithms didn't F me in the A 24/7. Like it's so funny because sometimes I'll have a show that like I won't even be a guest, but just like some topic will be trending, and I'll do 10 or 20,000 views, and it's just a solo show of me, and then the rest of the time it's like 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 views, and it's just you never know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really when you see like the PewDiePies of the world or the other guy, I'm Mr. Beast of the world,
Yeah.
and you realize like, oh, if you become a favorite son of the algorithm, like you're like a billionaire.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is more valuable than anything to just be to have favorable algorithmic treatment, and it's very challenging to game. But if you think about like the amount of power that the people have, those that are actually crafting that algorithm, it's unbelievable. And this is the other point that I intend to make to Tim Pool is that there is no as far as I'm concerned, there's no obvious increased danger from the CCP having control over our access or our information or even modifying the algorithm than it is the alphabets of the world or the metas of the world or the
Mm-hmm.
CIA or the FBI's of the world. Like these people, as far as I'm concerned, the United States federal government is it way more of an existential threat to me than the CCP. They actually have, like, I'm domiciled here. They have the ability to fine and tax and sanction and imprison me for, wrong think. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a way more clear and present danger. I mean, they've rounded up Trump supporters by the tune of thousands. They brag about how many hundreds of years they put them in prison. I'm not even a Trump supporter, but because I believe in the Bill of Rights, they think I am. So
Yeah.
it's like they could absolutely come for us. It's obvious to me that the gravest threat to the not just the American people, but probably the people all over the world is the United States government. And it sounds as if like I'm anti-American for saying that, but I think it's the most pro-American thing you can say.
Quite the
It's like,
opposite.
I love this
Yeah.
country. I hate this government. Like, I have no qualms with saying it because it's true.
Yeah.
And it's very important that I think we all realize, like, this is the paradigm we live under.
Yeah, I think it's critical for people to realize that if you care about the country and you care about the people of the country, then the United States government is your greatest enemy. The equating of the government with society is the most insane and damaging, like, mental framing ever, because it has always been like the majority of societies fall because of their government. Because of their government. It is
Right.
inside that most of the damage comes, not from outside.
Let me parlay that into this. I've gotten a lot of people that think that I have something in terms of anti-Semitism in my heart because I am more sympathetic to the Palestinians in this particular conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my critique is of the IDF. It's of the Israeli government. It's of the Netanyahus of the world. I think what's happening over there is absolutely heartbreaking. It has nothing to do with animus towards the Jewish community broadly. One of my best friends is Dave Smith, for God's sakes. He also agrees with me when it comes to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Oh, and might I add, he's Jewish. So this is not about Jewish people. But I think this is the problem, is that when you make it so that people perceive criticism of a government as a criticism of a people, that's a huge, huge misdirect. And it actually lends defense to the evil institution known as the federal governments, wherever they are, all over the world. Like, because I criticize the CCP, do you think I hate the Chinese? No, of course I don't. So it's like, I think it's really important people realize that, because otherwise it allows people not to focus on the arguments that I'm making, and it gets caught up in this collectivist garbage, which I totally oppose.
Yeah. And I think it's an indication, like, I think it projects how they think. Is that, like, it's a projection of the fact that they are equating the Israeli government with the Israeli people. And it's like, wait a second. So if the Israeli government does something great or does something terrible, you're going to take some random Jewish person in a restaurant and be like, congratulations, or you're a bad person. Like, what? Like, what
It's
kind of
ridiculous.
idiot ideology? Like, how absurd that image of equating things. There's that great, the animator, the artist, what is her freaking name, who made Persepolis. And she had a freaking amazing quote. And it's something, the gist of it is that because she's Iranian, I believe, or Saudi, somewhere in the Middle East, but somewhere who is considered a Muslim evil back in the 2001 era. And she basically made a brilliant little statement of just, your government, like, we are led to believe that you and I are incredibly different, that you and I have different beliefs and all of these things. And there is less difference between your government and my government than there is between you and me. Then, oh shit. And the framing is, I'm getting my framing backwards, but that there is more difference between you and your government and me and my government than there is between you and me. Like, our governments are not us. They have nothing to do with us. They are not, their opinions aren't ours. Like, and the idea of making that equating is just so absurd and so destructive. It creates so much hate and accusation for nothing. for
Yep.
nothing. Like,
I
imagine
totally
if
agree.
I wanted to punch you because of something the mayor of Miami did,
Yeah, it's
like what kind of idiocy have we allowed to become normal? I don't.
I know, but it's really pervasive. Like,
Mhm.
what you realize is that, like, even in the libertarian community, which
Yeah.
are, alleged individualists, like, we have actually absolutely been fractured by those that think that we ought to be standing with Ukraine, by those
Yeah.
that think we ought to be standing with Israel. It's like, this is I am a non-interventionist. Like, I don't want to intervene in these arenas. The reason that I'm not in the Ukrainian camp to a large extent is because I realized that it was the United States State Department that fomented the coup in 2014, and might I add, they were also responsible in 2008, and they've been intervening in that arena forever. NATO expansion has been directed by the Bill Clinton administration all the way up through today. Like, this is extraordinarily provocative. This is all about the United States government, the United States State Department, the CIA. This is not about, who's right and who's wrong. It's not about justifying the death of hundreds of thousands of innocent Ukrainians, which is absolutely heartbreaking. It's that I don't
Hmm.
want to be involved. But the tribalism, disease exists even amongst libertarians, very much so. And it's like, uh, it's just heartbreaking. It's
Yeah.
very infuriating too.
Dude, have you, part of me, uh, like, it is infuriating. And part of me wants to, like, it's not like you and I are immune to it either,
Sure.
like even being aware of it, like part of me is like, this is a great flaw of humanity, but then also like we don't really have an option. Like we have to kind of personify big, complex things. But it's just so important that we realize it's why we personify corporations, like that Apple is this one thing with this one person. And it's why we stick the CEO on it. Like it's so funny to me, and I've had many arguments about this of like people judging Jack Dorsey for what happened to Twitter. And like all I can think is that like, Twitter had like 20,000 employees or something like that. Like just in the tens of thousands of people working. It might even be a lot more. And I was thinking, my hometown had like 9,000 people in it. It's like, what degree of what was going on in that town did I have no idea about? I have no clue. Like
Yeah.
houses I'd never walked in, basements. I have no clue what's going on. Imagine being the CEO of a company with 20,000 people. You have no idea what is happening. When people accuse you of something, is probably 99% of the time the first time you're hearing about it, you know?
Yeah. It's
And
brutal.
and
I'm sympathetic to them.
yeah,
It would
yeah.
suck.
Um and I always I try to temper that because like I do the same thing and be like, "Oh, Jack Dorsey's this Twitter is so stupid and terrible," and
Right.
and you have to remember that these things are systems and that like we have our little linear brains and we can hold an image of seven in our mind at any one time, and if we're really lucky it's like nine.
Yeah.
And we're talking about things with tens of thousands. We can't even hold the proper number of zeros to think of the number. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean but it's like, it's interesting because you have, like, someone has to be held to account for the evil of the system,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't really change
Yeah.
the system. So, like, this is why I'll focus on Anthony Fauci and his role in COVID's creation.
Hmm.
It's like I have to hold someone to account. I
Yeah.
can't just say, well, the system is rotten. So no one gets blamed. Like,
Hmm.
no, I can't allow that, because that means that the system just, it persists and it grows upon itself. So you have to hold someone to account. But I agree, like, certainly much of the evil that's happened because of the CDC or DHS or any of these are not about the CEO that sits on top, or whatever the government title is that certifies this person as the CEO. The system is just really sick because it's very bureaucratic, and it's grown upon itself decade after decade in, like, kind of a metastasizing cancerous fashion.
Hmm.
But you also have to feed into people's kind of tribal instincts, and also get them to rally to reform this. And, like, oftentimes if you're just like, end the Fed, even though that resonated with the libertarian community, like, I think it's way more viable to, like, advocate against Jerome Powell and make him the personification of evil
Mhm.
amongst the normie audience. Even though I think Jerome Powell is probably, not the worst Fed chair we've ever had,
Yeah.
he's still, Lord Palpatine. It's still he's been a good emperor, I guess, kind of, but he still has to go. The institution itself has to be abolished. So it's interesting. Like I even though I'm cognizant of why this is flawed,
Mhm.
I will utilize it at times because I realize I have to demonize an individual in order to galvanize people to the cause of abolishing the institution, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I'm curious. I want to shift gears a little bit. Is Have you been watching, and or what have you been what's your degree of exploration, I guess, of what's been going on with what's the acronym, BTFP, the
Bank
temporary.
Term Finance Program.
Yeah. And how that's kind of coming to a close, and
Yeah.
where the bank runs and all the insolvencies, where this is going, because I think a lot of people have made the mistake of thinking that this is over and
Yeah,
that
it's
this
not.
got fixed, and practically nothing has actually changed. I'm curious your take, and where you're seeing this going, and what your kind of timeline is.
Yeah, I am certainly aware of it. If people want to go back to Liberty Lockdown of a year ago, I did a 15-minute breakdown on this particular bill because I thought it was so newsworthy, and otherwise people would have been oblivious. I was actually very flattered in that Dave Smith has repeatedly referenced it on different programs that he went when I want to know about banking shenanigans, I go to Clint's show. He says he says it all the time. And I'm like, that's awesome. The fact that there is an area of expertise that one of my heroes turns to hear my opinion. So yes, BTFP is absolutely catastrophic. It is yet another Band-Aid on a bullet wound that is our financial system. For those that don't understand, what it is, there was Silicon Valley Bank and a whole bunch of regional banks that were insolvent because of the Fed's interest rate hiking policy, largely. And what that meant is that they became insolvent because they were sitting on a lot of long-term debt. Long-term debt, when you adjust it versus the Fed funds rate, which is elevating, you can actually, on paper, be underwater because you could not liquidate these assets. And if you were forced to liquidate these assets, you would take a massive loss. And that's what most banks are looking at, is that on paper they are insolvent. And
Mhm.
so the BTFP was established through the Treasury and the Federal Reserve to allow them to offload that those debt instruments at par, at face value, and allow the U.S. taxpayer to take the loss essentially. But what made the program really sinister is that they made it so that these institutions did not have to report publicly who was doing it. So, you asked me, where do I think this is going? I don't have a fucking clue, guy. I have no idea where it's going because I don't know who's
They
utilized it or
don't
to
let
what
it.
amount.
They don't let us
Yeah.
know.
So all I'll say is strap in. I think it's going to get really bad. But the reality is they could kick the can again. They could extend it. They could do all sorts of stuff. This is why I've really given up on trying to predict timing of things.
Mhm.
All I'll say is that there is enormous existential risk that sits on the books of some of the largest banking institutions all the way down to the smallest. And we don't have any clarity on how severe it is. So you just have to prepare for the worst and make sure that you don't have, more than 250,000, FDIC insured money in any of these institutions. You have to, probably diversify further than that. I would hope you shouldn't probably be sitting on that much fiat. Period. It's just a very challenging time, and risk analysis and investing advice has become extraordinarily complicated because the system becomes more murky every time they do anything that's not really publicly understood. And I just explained it in 5 minutes, but the attention span of the average American is about 30 seconds. So they're not going to, 99% of people have no fucking clue what I'm talking about right now. But for your audience, I hope they'll take it to heart.
Yeah. And the thing that I've been kind of watching, which happened just a couple of days ago, is the New York Community Bank. I'm not sure if you saw this, but it lost 7% of its deposits in a month. And their total liabilities were 70 something. It was like $78 billion. They lost 7% of their deposits. And they were essentially like they're not going to be able to keep doing deposits. And this is like one of those things that like is really interesting about the era that we live in, is that we can actually have these weird, even though the entire system is insolvent, like completely, but you would think that like, oh, well, if it's all insolvent, then like, you can't have bank runs, you can't have bank collapses because it's all built into the currency. Like you just keep giving it, except that they have to settle between themselves so that you can have this weird cascading, like kind of hot potato insolvency where whoever is most leveraged and is most losing their actual reserves can actually fulfill their liabilities. And then they go under, and that leverage, that insolvency gets swallowed up by a different one. But then you can then crash that one by just going to a different bank. So in the world of APIs, where you can electronically move money around at insane speeds, you can have bank, like we think, a lot of people unfortunately think that we have left the era of bank runs. Quite the opposite. We have entered the era of bank runs at midnight, to the tune of billions of dollars. And they got
with no escape.
With no escape. And the New York Community Bank got a $1 billion injection, which is like essentially a bailout from some partners. I can't remember exactly who it was. But like, I don't think that's going to shore up anything. I think that's going to freak people out that only 7% of deposits moved. They had to have $1 billion injection, and there's like $78 billion worth of liabilities for deposits on the books. Was $1 billion doesn't do anything to that?
No,
like that's gone. No. That's less than 7%. Another couple of days of this, and they're going to be right back in the same situation. And you probably just accelerated it because now people are going like, "You need $1 billion now already?"
Right?
Like,
well, think about this. This is why the BTFP was structured in a way where you didn't have to report it publicly, is because they realized that if people heard, "Oh, you're upside down on billions and billions of dollars worth of assets, and ultimately you're going to have to take, federal government money to keep yourself solvent," well, then I'm going to withdraw my savings because I don't know if you're going to be solvent when this program ends. So because of that, they made it so that we can't really know. Yeah. But this is the issue, and I'm sure you're well aware of it. In fact, I know you are when it comes to fractional reserve banking, is that because you're able to deploy way more capital than you actually own, you end up becoming insolvent just with a very minor decrease in your balance sheet. And that's essentially what we're witnessing here, is that, you have $7 billion worth of withdrawals, and it's, all right, was that the number? Was it 7 billion?
It was 7%.
7%. If you just have 7% worth of withdrawals, well, you can have 5% of withdrawals and you can be insolvent. You could have 2% theoretically and be insolvent because you've deployed more capital than you have on hand. And I think that this is a very dangerous system. It becomes increasingly perilous. And what you were describing earlier is essentially systemic risk, is that cascading defaults are undoubtedly in the offing. The issue and the reason it becomes so complicated to analyze this is because of the derivatives market. You don't really know who is holding the bag.
Yeah.
And that's kind of,
it's been repackaged and passed around and divided up, and like the bag is everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So like, you may think that because, this bank has lost 7% of its deposits, that they're the only bank that's in trouble. But in reality, thanks to the derivatives market, it could be, I don't know, Goldman Sachs or somebody who's sitting on the derivatives contracts on the bad end of the derivative contract that is ultimately going to get just annihilated because this bank goes under. So you may think that you're fine sitting at Bank of America or Chase, and you're probably right because they'll probably get bailed out by the federal government. But setting that aside, it's like you don't know who's actually really, really in the line of fire. And this is this is why I'm done investing in this market, because it's just impossible to analyze. I mean, just to make a single investment into one banking institution, you'd have to have a month of deep analysis to actually
Yeah.
figure out where all the risk lies, how their balance sheet, how their book actually looks, what their balance sheet actually amounts to. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And is there a bank that doesn't have the problem? Like, it's like so fundamental. It's like how many banks would you have to investigate with that level of scrutiny to even find one that might even be like halfway safe,
Right. And how much time are you going to spend to decide on where you're going to just store your capital when you could just like buy a safe and just put your money in it?
Just get Bitcoin. just Bitcoin, put it on a cold card, just like stick it in your drawer. Like, just don't think about it. You're good.
So this is why I became a Bitcoiner, is because I realized like all of the potential risks that exists within Bitcoin is so minuscule compared to the risk in the standard safe financial market.
So true. God, it's so true. And that's what I think people don't understand, is they don't see any of the risk. They think that default and normal is safe because of default and normal. And the risk is just extraordinary. It is extraordinary. And people are like, Bitcoin is risky. It's like, no, Bitcoin is reliable. I know exactly what the monetary policy is going to be next year. I know exactly what it's going to be in 10 years. I know exactly what my keys are going to do. Like I know everything. I can verify so much shit about Bitcoin, and I can't verify any of the same important issues with my fiat or banking or anything. Like none of it. I can't.
This is a really important point to make, and that a lot of people will think of the success story of America as being a product of individual liberty, the Bill of Rights. They'll get really nebulous with it. Mm-hmm. But really, in my estimation, my analysis of why America was so successful is that it was the first nation that had a really lengthy, sustained appreciation, respect, and defense of property rights.
Yeah.
That's what made America extraordinarily special, because when you're an investor, which I have spent my entire adult life, managing investing capital myself personally, and managing, capital for other people too, to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, what matters most is preservation of capital, growth of capital, and ownership of that capital.
Mm-hmm.
If you have those ingredients, well, you're going to be an incredibly successful investor. If you don't have confidence in the private property rights of your capital, that you actually own that shit, well, then you don't have square one. You don't have any faith that you can actually, like, who cares about return on investment if it might be stolen from you tomorrow? Like, it doesn't fucking matter. So this is the problem with the trajectory of America. This is the problem with the TikTok ban, I might add, is that it is once again another shot over the bow when it comes to property rights. And it's also a very protectionist perspective. So you think that there will be no knock-on consequences of us just arbitrarily deciding that one social media app should be banned or forced divestiture? I mean, this is the type of shit that happens in Venezuela. This is the type of shit that happens in communist countries. Like, this is not the American way. And if you're going to embrace this perspective, well, then you are abandoning what made America special. You're abandoning what made us the most wealthy nation and the most wealthy people in human history. It's a huge fucking mistake and extraordinarily short-sighted. And this is why I'm so pessimistic about the future of this country, is that people don't value property rights. It is so fucking important. It's unbelievable. And most people don't even, like, if I were to even say those words, property rights, they're like, that sounds like some nebulous libertarian nonsense. No, it's actually the whole reason you're free, motherfucker. It's the most important thing on the planet, you absolute imbecile.
All of it is downstream. All of it is downstream.
Yep.
Actually, author Devin Erickson had a phenomenal Twitter thread on this. Just the concept of investment from its most fundamental thing is that, like, if you're a caveman and you're just using stones or whatever to get your food or whatever, everything's like simple, and anything that you can make only takes like a couple of minutes. You got a sharp stick, anybody can go grab a sharp stick, right? Well, the only way that you actually build out a society is when you do anything that's complex enough to take time away from going to get your food, or preparing, for your family or your home or whatever it is. So as soon as you take like 8 hours or 2 days or something in which you don't go hunt for food, which you go hungry in order to get food later, that you make a net. You make a net for, to catch fish or something, which is a very long, difficult, and risky investment because the net might not work. You're probably going to make it too big, or not lace it right the first 20 times that you do it. Who knows? And you make a net. As soon as that investment is done, everything about property rights is crucial, absolutely critical to protect the fact that that is his net. Because if somebody comes and then steals that net and use it, nobody will ever take 2 days to make a net again. Literally the process of society just rip the roots out and pour salt on it, because there is never any reason to ever make an investment in anything. And the entirety of society is the concept of investing in something today that will not produce fruits until tomorrow. If you do not protect that, literally no one will make the investment, and the society will just rot and break, and the potholes will get bigger and they won't get replaced properly, and the shingles will fall off the house. Everything rots. If you cannot protect investment to repair and make new things, it all dies. All of it.
Go to San Francisco, guy. You can see exactly what we're describing. If you don't honor property rights, if you don't enforce property rights, like if you allow shoplifting, if you allow lockdowns, if you allow all of this nonsense, if you allow vagrancy and drug use in the public square, you're going to see cultural decline. And this is a product of not honoring property rights. Mm-hmm. Like more than anything, that's what this is about. It's not even policy. It's not about, like bleeding heart liberalism and all this garbage. It's just about abandoning property rights. At its core, that is by far the biggest factor. And what you're describing is opportunity cost. Mm-hmm. And opportunity cost is like, will I fish today, or will I build a net so I can get 10 fish more readily 5 days from now? Yeah. And if I think that net is going to be stolen from me in 48 hours, I'm not ever going to build the fucking net. I'm just going to eat the fish. I'm going to fish. I'm going to eat the fish. I'm going to fish. I'm going to eat the fish. I'm never going to grow anything. I'm never going to be able to produce more fish than I need personally, so that then I can create a business where I sell the fish to somebody else. I'm going to just live for today. And it modifies the time preference of every single person living under that system. And once you do that, you're fucking basically a tribal species once again. You don't have civilization. You're not going to be able to build out any empire or metropolis, none of it. And this is where we're at. I mean, this is the whole reason that we're seeing, the most incredible civilization in human history in America decline rapidly. And this is why I think you're seeing such an incredible, wellspring of opportunity in places like El Salvador, hopefully in Argentina in the not too distant future, is that they are fighting to get out of that system and back into an honoring of property rights type of perspective. It's a very challenging transition. I wish them well. I have no idea if Bukele or Milei, for that matter, are the real deal, or if they're going to become tyrants themselves. I have no idea. But this is like, once your system becomes so unhealthy, it requires extraordinary measures to try and snap civilization back out of it. So it's a very perilous time. And this is all over the world as is happening, because it's less and less understood, the topic that you and I are delving into today. And that makes me very, very pessimistic that this isn't just kind of like, well, obviously property rights matters, but it's very important.
Swan Bitcoin has the full suite of Bitcoin financial services. You can instantly buy, with your bank account or wire transfer, any amount of Bitcoin up to $10 million worth. And you can easily set up what I have been doing for ages, which is an automatic purchase of Bitcoin on a weekly or monthly basis. You just pick your time frame and then automatically withdraw it to your cold storage. And still they have free withdrawals to self-custody, which I was sure would be gone by now. But you should always treat any custodian as a point of failure. And luckily, you won't have to go anywhere for all of the information and advice you need for why you should withdraw and how to do it safely, because Swan Bitcoin has all of the resources you need and will regularly remind you. About 80% or more of their customers automatically withdraw their coins. That is an amazing feat, if you ask me. Then they also have the Swan IRA if you have a traditional IRA and you want to get it allocated to Bitcoin. And there's so much more. With Swan Private, they have inheritance planning. You also have Swan business accounts, and you can even do Bitcoin as a part of your employee benefit plans. They have an advisory. They have the Swan Vault, a multi-sig service for those who want to have the benefits of holding the majority of their keys, but still also want to be able to rely on a trusted institution in the case of an emergency or a disaster. If you haven't started into Bitcoin yet, Swan is an amazing place to begin. Go to swan.com/guy. The link will be right there in the description. Again, that is swan.com/guy. And they will know that I sent you, and my beautiful face will be right there at the top of the page to greet you. I am a longtime user myself, and a huge thank you to Swan for supporting this show, and I definitely recommend you check them out. Yeah, it's interesting because it's got me. I'm really curious how Bitcoin, like I think the perception of Bitcoin, and maybe you have pushback, like you're not like so deep into the Bitcoin space. I'm just kind of surrounded by Bitcoin. So yeah, it's easy to lose sight of, just like we talked about before, surrounding yourself with yes men it's easy to lose perspective on reality. But I feel like we're in an interesting spot with Bitcoin because with the sort of TradFi legitimacy that has occurred with the ETFs, is that I think we're in this, and the growing cracks again that have remained and are getting worse and are probably going to start showing up. We try to paint over them, but paint doesn't cure crack in concrete. And as that happens, it's going to be really interesting because we've had numerous bull runs in Bitcoin, like 4 major cycles in Bitcoin that were fueled by speculation, greed, and exuberance. And Turda Meester said this in an interview, which I can't remember exactly which one it is. And if by some chance, I'm going to bug him again because I really want him to come on the show and talk about it. But he said, we've never seen one driven by anxiousness. Like, we've never seen one yet driven by people being nervous about keep staying in the banking and fiat system, and that we are very likely to see that fuel this time.
I agree.
Especially where we are, which will make this one very
not even anxiousness,
unique.
But existential threat.
Fear, just fear.
Yeah.
Fear not of Bitcoin, but fear of being exposed to, like being wrapped up in something that is chaotic and has no clear center. Like right. there's no, it's like being on a bunch of little pieces of ice that are floating and bobbing around in the water. Like there's nothing solid to hold on to. And that it is very likely that people will start exiting some of their capital into Bitcoin specifically because they don't know where else to stick it so that it doesn't catch on fire with the rest of the system burning. And when that happens, I think 2 things will happen. 1, we will have a screaming crazy bull market. And 2, the politicians and the political system, the counterfeit class, will blame Bitcoin. Which part of me is like, God, Jesus, that's not going to be fun. And then a part of me is like, this is going to be fascinating to watch this kind of tug of war unfold, because I still just don't think there's a whole lot they can do about it. A lot of mess will happen in the political system, in what we are politically allowed to do. And they will come with their $5 wrenches and try to undo the problem by same thing, just the same thing they're doing with TikTok. Is that like, oh, if we just continue to outlaw the result of our bad behavior and stupid, irresponsible, corrupt policies, well, then it will appear as if they aren't as bad as they actually are. And right. Bitcoin is basically the giant, the bright neon like movie poster board that says, by the way, all of this shit is breaking. Look at the reflection of what is happening in the fiat world. I
think that's exactly right.
So I'm curious. I mean, I know you're generally pessimistic. It's interesting. I go back and forth, and I think I've even talked about this with you on the show. is I have moments of like extreme pessimism and moments of just like, we're gonna fucking win. We are winning so hard. I'm curious what your take is on just kind of Bitcoin in relation to the other image, because we've just been kind of talking about TradFi and the fiat world and the fiat mindset. Like, where do you see Bitcoin fitting into this outside of just like stash it away and like kind of have my foot out the door? Um, what's the picture in your mind?
I mean, for me, it's still just an escape hatch.
Mhm.
I haven't seen it utilized in consumer transactions to an extent that seems as if it's ready for showtime in terms of like replacing the fiat system entirely.
Super early in the medium of exchange phase. Super early.
Right.
Growing,
Right.
but like I'm on a Bitcoin standard now. So like if I'm holding fiat, it's within the period that my bills cycle. And that's it.
Right. But you're also the guy who's read more about Bitcoin than anybody you know.
That's right. That's motherfucker right.
So I'm saying you are the anomaly. You are
Yes.
not the standard.
Yes,
So
100%. 100%.
well, I appreciate that you have done that, and I appreciate that it's now possible. For most people, it's not really feasible. There's such a huge learning curve that's necessary, and there are some sacrifices that are necessary to take that path too. So until it becomes easier than the existing system, I think it's still going to be only for those that are in the know. But I'm actually very optimistic, contrary to all of my protestations to the contrary, about the current condition of things, in that like we are reaching more people than ever. I personally am, to a tune of hundreds of millions of people annually, which is absolutely fucking nuts, and I would have never thought possible. The fact that a message like mine would be compelling to that many people is almost incomprehensible. The fact that a guy who was not in the public eye up until 3 years ago could have an audience of that.
2020
of that
was like, right? Like, that's when you started this.
Yeah, that's when I started.
Jesus. God, you're like a rocket ship, my man.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So like I'm very optimistic in many ways, and I also ultimately think that like Bitcoin is symbolic of the reappreciation of property rights, even for those that don't understand it. You know, even for those that are perceiving it to be this speculative investment or just a great investment or whatever. Like that's not really the point. What's at its core, what makes it special is that it maintains its value. Yes, it appreciates, but that's only in contrast to the fact that everything else is inflating to oblivion. And I think that the more people embrace that system and realize that this is a much better way to live. It's just better to have certitude when it comes to your hard-earned capital. Like you want to be able to maintain it. Even if you don't grow it, you just want to be able to maintain the purchasing power. Like that is it ought to be such a given that that's how our financial system is structured.
Yeah.
But we've gotten so far afield of what is just kind of an obligatory, as far as I'm concerned, almost a right that like you ought to have some measurement of currency that allows you to maintain the purchasing power and use your labor from today in the distant future. It's like that ought to be like that's just kind of 101 for creating a functioning civilization and a system that's moral. And I think that that's what we're getting back to, is a more moral system. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that it ultimately will also, make it so that there's less war, because you can't borrow and print into oblivion the way the Federal Reserve and the State Department and the United States government and military does. So I think like I'm very optimistic in a lot of ways. The issue is that the system is so deeply sick right now. Like the broader governmental model is so deeply sick that like to get out of it is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to there's going to be massive pain for those that are totally oblivious to the conversation you and I are having right now, because they are not prepared. They don't even understand how sick it is. They don't understand the fixes that are necessary. They don't understand how to even protect themselves, much less start to get involved on a macro level and try and like actually fix things more broadly. So and we are still a very small minority. Like those that actually understand what we're talking about is a very small minority. Now, from the optimistic perspective, massive competitive advantage. You and I have an unbelievable competitive advantage compared to the average person.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that I have never lost sight of. And this is why I'm so devoutly libertarian, is because I have had an enormous competitive advantage my entire life because I understand money.
Mhm.
And particularly in a fiat system, if you understand the system and how it functions, you have, I mean, the competitive advantage is astronomical. And there's so few libertarians that are rich. And I'm like, how? How is this possible? How have you not used this information to your benefit? So yeah, which, is hilarious because I ought to be a billionaire because I was pretty rich back when Bitcoin was nothing.
Yeah.
And I should have known early on. So I'm believe me, I'm not bragging about anything. I'm just as dumb as everybody else. But I'm very optimistic about the competitive advantage of the people that uphold and cherish the values that you and I do.
Mhm.
And like the fact that those people have a competitive advantage over the status mindset makes me very positive, very optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something that you alluded to there, just talking about the idea of having the right of maintaining purchasing power is it's not necessary. I think it's really hard to pinpoint to like really be precise about what it is that you have quote unquote a right to in that context. Because what really money is it's a form of interrelated property rights rather than individual property rights.
Yep.
So what it means is that I am like let's say I make my net and then I sell it to you for Bitcoin. What I am saying is that Bitcoin is going to recognize my right to keep the value of the net without having the net anymore. Like I'm letting someone else use my net that I invested in, and I'm going to hang on to the value of it. So the intersubjective reality of property rights is actually maintained by the network of money. So fundamentally, the most clear example of what property rights are or ought to be, how they ought to be related to, is the monetary system. Is how does the money work? How much of your relation, just like, I don't have the right to the net being valuable. Like I need you to accept that, yes, it's worth X amount of quote unquote value by this other medium. And
because value is still subjective.
Yeah, value is still completely subjective. But it's kind of this collective promise almost that like, okay, well, if you want your property rights as well, and you accept my value in this, well, then now we have this network that allows us to basically hold a promise from everybody else in society that we're going to redeem the net that you put in, that you're going to be able to get something back out later. So that Bitcoin is actually an instantiation of global, decentralized, stateless property. It is property rights that can't be censored, can't be debased, can't be stolen, not within the network, not within the system itself. You can always $5 wrench somebody, but collectively, it can no longer be systemically corrupted and abused. And I think
massively valuable.
Fundamentally, that's such a, like, not only is that just horrifically revolutionary from the context of like historical precedent, like on the order of like the birth of the United States, I think, like the 5,000-year leap. But even more so in the face of where does each country go, what's the reaction or the potential consequences of this policy or that policy, is that if you remove that systemic fraud kind of at the base of all of our nation states and the nation state system, like as an idea, how much does it matter now what the policy is? What of the country can we salvage, save, and protect without caring which TikTok bill they pass or not? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then the same thing with Noster and Hole Punch and Keat and these things, is that like,
exactly.
Okay, well then let's just use something that they can't TikTok ban.
Yeah.
That they can't pass a bill and get rid of.
Oftentimes this is described as the parallel economy, but what we're really talking about is building a parallel civilization.
Yeah.
The issue is that the civilizations are still intertwined. There's still a monopoly on violence that comes from the federal level as well as the state level. And I think that's the loggerheads that we face, is like, yes, we are simultaneously building our our escape hatch, Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
but the storm is still upon us. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know how little the federal government matters at this point. Like the issue is like, how totalitarian does it become?
Yeah.
Do they start to, sure, you may have your keys, but like they can still put you in the gulags. Like there are still risks that are very existential. There's still the risk of World War III. There's still the risk of nuclear war. There's still the risk of cyber attacks and all sorts of like existential things. So like it all still matters, but it doesn't change the fact that you have to be building the ark.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, is like, I don't know when the storms are coming, and I don't know how severe it's going to be, but I'm building this fucking ark. and I'm so grateful that so many unbelievably brilliant people are building this ark with me. And I think that gives me more hope than anything. Is like, I know there's so many incredible people that are way smarter than me, that are absolutely, their entire lives are dedicated to building the ark along with me.
Yeah.
And I think that is the community that I am so proud to be a part of, even if I'm just, I'm underneath the deck just doing.
I'll replace the pipes, man. Just give me something to do. I want to help.
Just let me in the fucking ark, all right? So yeah, I think that's the question, and will the ark we build be stronger than the storm? And I don't know. I don't know. But I think that there's only one way out, and that's to build. And I think that we're doing that, and I think that's great reason for optimism.
Yeah. There was I think it was a recent Joe Rogan with Brett Weinstein. He had a really great, or wait, maybe it was Tucker with Brett. I don't remember, but Brett Weinstein had a really great clip section that he was talking about how, like, one of the big failures, I think, that they didn't plan on or predict or think about in the whole 2020 debacle is that what they did is they basically lit a fire and then collectively ostracized everyone who could think, everyone who had an independent mindset, and everyone who could genuinely build and engineer and innovate. And now there is this. Now is like, they've never really been organized. They never really had a common purpose. They were disparate and spread out all over the place. And now they kind of see things from the same direction. And so when they look around, they see people standing beside them that all have that same mindset, that same mentality, that same desire to build, and that same, like, okay, well, how do we think our way out of this problem? And he said, regardless of whether I'm super pessimistic or optimistic, and what degree of damage or how bad it's going to get, said, I'll tell you one thing I wouldn't do is I would not bet against that group of people.
I love it.
Like, that would be the worst thing to set my position up for, is to think that they won't figure anything out and they won't make anything better. That's
a great point. I mean, I've said this before. I wouldn't exist if not for lockdowns. Yeah. I wouldn't have done what I did. I would have never transferred out. I would have probably still been a mortgage broker, just living my happy life in San Diego, California, and playing beach volleyball 5 days a week. That's who I would have been.
Yeah.
You motherfuckers created me. So now you have to deal with me. Now I'm a problem. Now I have an audience. I have an army of people that are listening to me every time I utter some nonsense. So, oops, you brought me off of the sideline, you dumb bastards. And I'm just one of tens of thousands of people that have been activated, millions of people that have been activated all over the world in a major way, and in a very passionate, inspired way that will not be extinguished. And I am super fucking optimistic about what those people will do with that inspiration. Realizing that we no longer have property rights in America was a fucking unbelievable shot across the bow for me. When I realized that they could just have a foreclosure and eviction moratorium nationwide. I was like, oh, we don't have property rights in this country anymore. Fascinating. But I'm grateful that I know what I am dealing with. I know what I'm living under. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people afterwards obviously went back to sleep. They woke up briefly and they're like, they hit the snooze button. They're like, back to bed. But for millions of us, there is no going back to sleep. Like I know exactly what you're capable of, and it is horrifying. And I will be damned if I allow you to do it again. And if you do it again, I'm going to continue to become more and more radicalized and create more and more people like me that are going to fucking make every single plan you have an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to stop.
I'm going to be the mosquito in the room and you are going to fucking hate me.
Exactly. And this is not even about me, dude. This is about my children. This is about the future of this country. This is about, can I have a family and have any confidence at all that they get to have a life that is as good at minimum? And I want it to be better. Mm-hmm. I want it to be better than the life I had. And I had a great fucking life. And I will be damned if I don't produce a world and a lifestyle that is better, or not, excuse me, not a world. I'm not a globalist, but if I don't produce a place, a location that my child can have a better life than I did. Yeah. And I think that that's what every man, sorry, ladies, I'm sure you feel the same way, but I'm going to speak to the men right now. Every man who's worth his salt wants that for their child. Yeah. And I think that that's what I'm fighting for more than anything. And the fact that I'm 40 and I don't have any kids, this is why the imperative is upon me, because I intend to have kids in the not too distant future. And I'm like, I'm going to risk everything. I'm going to sacrifice everything right now, because it's when I still have the highest risk threshold that I'm like, all right, I don't have kids yet. I can fucking caution to the wind. Let's fucking go. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to do everything I can while I can. And, we'll see what happens. And I think that the more people, like, even though I'm a very staunch individualist, it's the millions of people that feel like me, that are doing what I'm doing, are going to make the collective difference. And I think that's what we're only seeing the very beginning stages of. And I don't know what it's going to amount to, but like, if you see that and it's happening, then it's like, there can be incredible beauty on the other side of that. Yeah. And especially if you're looking at the grim nature of our current paradigm, it's like, well, that's got to be the answer. Like it just has to. I still believe that there is something to just morality and hard work and ethics that, like, it has to prevail. It has to. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I shouldn't feel that way, but I believe that it does. I don't come from a religious background, but I still believe that, like, living in a moral and righteous fashion, it has better odds of prevailing than living as a tyrant. That's my belief.
No, I completely agree. Like, and honestly, I can't see the value in believing otherwise. Like, if it isn't true, I'd still rather live my whole fucking life believing it was.
Exactly.
And, believing it is a prerequisite to ever having it. Who's going to make the investment in a fishnet to make my life easier and to get, to secure the food for my family and have a more prosperous future if you literally think it's not possible.
Right. And the other key about America that I did not get into is that it's about having future guidance. It's about, because I was a money manager, as I've said many times. It's like, you have to have some level of certainty about the future, because otherwise you won't deploy that capital. It's like CapEx. Like you have a time horizon by which you expect there to be a return on investment. And like, this is why the real estate market's so fucked up, is because the Federal Reserve has hiked the Fed funds rate, and it, really, really rapidly, faster than has ever happened in your or I's lifetime, from the zero bound up to 6%. That it's like, that has made it so that there is no clarity as to monetary policy. And really what that means is there's no clarity as to the value of your savings. So it means that you don't want to start a housing development of any magnitude, because you don't know if the Federal Reserve is going to hike the Fed funds rate to 10%, because that means that then the expected return on that real estate investment will be just demolished, because you won't have any consumers that can afford the prices that you're expecting to receive, even though your input costs, because of the inflationary pressure, because the printing insanity is now doubled. So you have to sell at an astronomical price level, or else you won't make a return. In fact, you'll lose everything. You'll probably go bankrupt, because you have to borrow money to build these housing developments. And a housing development means that you need 12 or 18 months, or probably 24 months of relative clarity on what the ultimate end product will be worth. And you don't have that. So what does that mean? Well, it means that not enough inventory is coming online to match the demand, which means that prices continue to rise to astronomical levels that they shouldn't be rising to because no one can afford it. But this is where we're at. And it's like,
It's
that's what
literally
made America special.
feedback on feedback on feedback on feedback of like negative
Exactly.
consequences on negative consequences. And it's just because of uncertainties, because we don't know shit about what our money system, our financial system, our debt load, like none of it is even slightly reliable.
At the end of the day, we don't even know if we own our own property.
Yeah.
you know,
we don't even know if we're going to be able to fish with the net we fucking made, you know?
Right. I don't even know if you could just AOC gets elected president and all of a sudden, anybody who owns more than one house can't own more than one house. And I'm a real estate developer and I'm sitting on 100 houses and I can only own one of these motherfuckers. Like that's a big problem. So this is the uncertainty that we're dealing with. And I think this is
unless
why
you're a corporate entity with like 30 pages of exceptions and like the right lawyers.
Of course. Whoever's in bed with the state will always be protected. Well, not always. Eventually they eat them too, but they eat all of us first.
You will own nothing and be happy.
Yeah, this is the reason that Bitcoin is such a godsend, is that it's the one investment class or asset class that I'm like, they can't do that with this. Like that is, I mean, that never had immense value to me when I was, managing money, because it was like, I didn't have any real doubts as to property rights. I didn't have any real doubts as to the purchasing power of the dollar. I knew consistently it was going to lose 4 or 5% of its purchasing power annually. That's at least a level of consistency that I'm like, I can deal with that. I can still make a return on investment that supersedes that. That's no longer the case. I don't have any certainty that I can make more than the inflationary rate by investing in real estate or investing in the stock market. And once you're in that position, like, capital just freezes because they don't know what the fuck to do. And that's when you start to get, cascading defaults. That's when you get bank runs. And this is why I became a Bitcoiner, because I was like, look, even though I don't understand it totally, I don't understand it as well as the Guy Swans of the world, I understand it well enough to know that it is way more secure than every other investment class or asset class. And like, that's a paradigm shift that's amazing, because I am a libertarian, but like, I also was in the fiat system for decades.
Yeah.
And I never thought that we would get to this in my lifetime. And I just want to like give people a concept of like how fast this happened.
Yeah.
And even though I was a libertarian and I didn't trust anything, and I understood the nefarious nature of the Federal Reserve and central banking, and I understood all of it, and I still was like, well, this system, I understand it. It's safe. It's steady, at least. Like, it's not going to change dramatically. It changed dramatically in recent memory, and I don't think that you put that genie back in the bottle. So I think that's the reason that people have to be, on guard more than ever.
Yeah. There's something that you said like right in the middle of there that I think is so crazy to think about and realize how deep of a source this is to societal stability, is the fact that money freezes if you don't know what to expect in the future. And if everyone is in debt, if everyone is leveraged and money freezes, the entire thing collapses. Like, it all falls apart, because you have to deleverage if you don't have flows. So now, like, sitting still means forced sales everywhere. Yep. It means a massive deleveraging event. Whereas on a sound, and that's the nature of fiat money, is that everyone is in debt. Like, even the person who could afford the house now can't afford it because someone else has issued new debt to drive up the price past the only resources we actually had available to spend. So even the person who built the house now has to go at least another $20,000 in debt to buy the house, because the price is surged up by the 10 people who got debt to bid up that price past what actual resources exist. The one dude who built the house. Like, that's what we have, a house, And the beautiful thing about sound money is that if everything freezes, nothing happens. We just all pause and take a break for a second.
Right.
You can stop. You can relax. You can leisure on your porch for a bit and think about your next step, because you're not underwater.
Yeah.
You're not trying to offload this month's supply because you financed it last month. This month's supply is just your profit that you're going to then, your equity that you then turn around and buy for the next month's supply. So if you're not doing so good, well, okay, well, let's pause for a second and regroup and figure out what's wrong with our strategy. You don't have that option in the fiat system. You run as fast as you can or you die.
Yep. And this is where the Dave Ramseys of the world would be correct.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah.
If we were on a sound money standard, then you would not need to continue to borrow money and invest and try and outpace inflation. But that's not where we are, Dave. so you have to transition from that system into something that's more sound, that's more hard. And I think that's where we're headed. And it's because we're all, as Peter Schiff describes it, heroin addicts addicted to the printing press. It's like there's going to be withdrawal symptoms for many people. And by many people, I mean billions, billions of people are going to go through terrible withdrawals. But for those that are already, taking that syringe out of their arm, like it's not easy either. But if you do it now, you have the opportunity to taper. Like you can survive the withdrawal cycle. Whereas those that do it once everybody's doing it, well, then it's just like it's going to be a nightmare.
Everybody's going to be yanking it out of their arms at the same time, and the supply is going to diminish, like just evaporate. Yeah.
But I think that's actually a decent metaphor for where we're at. This bunch of fucking heroin addicts, and if you go to San Francisco or any major city, you'll see a bunch of them. It's oddly, not just a metaphor.
I was about to say it's a great metaphor, but it's oddly like actually not a metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh shit. Well, dude, I don't want to keep you here for 3 hours. I'm sure we could just keep rolling with this, but I'll give you. I think we're probably like 2 hours now. Any final thoughts? I just want to say, in the context of you're talking about you wake up in 2020 and you started Liberty Lockdown and you really have like soared. It's been crazy. We didn't even talk about the VP thing. We literally didn't even talk about it.
Nope.
But congrats on that. Like I think that's huge, and I really think I've been more and more interested with what is happening in the Libertarian Party, just because I think the long-term strategy is so smart of just attacking small. How many, and I've been seeing it more and more, and not even necessarily just with the Libertarian Party, but like just popping up all over the place, is that somebody gets on the stage and in the Congress or in the UK Parliament, like on all these things, and it's this little nobody from nowhere, and they say something that just hits, and you're like, where is that sense? What happened to that common sense? And it's starting to rise from the bottom. And the libertarian strategy of just like, okay, we're not going to win this next election. Like the likelihood is, half of 1%, and
way smaller.
Yeah, way smaller, very low percent. But what can we do in 20 years if we hit this county, if we hit this town, if we get this mayor? Like what can we do if we start sparks everywhere and we get people saying the common sense things that everyone is disallowed from saying today? And so I've been more and more interested in that, even though we didn't get to talk about it. But I just want to say thank you. Like I'm super grateful. I love your show. Love what you're doing with Luke and Tim and everything. And it's been awesome. It's been pretty wild to see it, actually. So congrats.
Dude,
like I feel awesome for you, and I could imagine somebody who deserves it more. So
well, thank you, brother. And I really appreciate your show as well. It has made me I steal your ideas constantly.
Please, that's what they're there for. If I ever come up with a good one, steal the shit out of it.
I'm pretty damn good at ranting, but I am terrible at metaphors, and you fucking kick ass at metaphors. So that's the main thing that I'm learning from you and Dave Smith. You guys both are really good at metaphors to explain like complex topics, whereas I'll just be like, I'll just like scream it at the audience. You guys will come up with like this really eloquent metaphor that like makes it very concise and able to be digested. So you, Tom Woods, Dave Smith, Scott Horton, like a bunch of people have really improved my delivery, and I think ultimately like that this is the community that I'm most proud to be a part of, is that I feel like we all learn from each other. We all uplift one another. We're all benefiting from shared audiences and overlapped audiences and things like that. And I'm very optimistic about, whatever will come from our community, setting aside the United States government and setting aside global politics and everything else. Like this is a community I am very, very optimistic about. And just to brief pitch for the VP run, if anybody has listened to this and likes the ideas, the end of May is the national convention for the Libertarian Party. I do not have the nomination as of yet, though most people perceive me to be the front runner for it. If you become a delegate for your state, which I think there's still a handful of states left where you can do so, then you are permitted to go and become one of the 1,000 or so people that will be the delegates that get to decide not just who the VP is, but also who the president of the United States candidate will be for the Libertarian Party. That is about as much power as you will ever have in our stupid democratic system. I was a delegate, 2 years ago, and was able to put in Angela McArdle as the chair and modify much of the platform and things like that for the Libertarian Party. So like, if you're interested in political outlets, like there's only one party that you could actually have any say so in any significant fashion. And the Libertarian Party is actually still at that scale where a single person can have a lot of influence on it. So, my hope is that, as I said, less than a 0.5% chance of winning. I don't at all expect. In fact, I would be mortified if I became the vice president of the United States. So,
what have we done?
Exactly. I'm not interested in taking any convertible rides through Dallas. But I think that, with the imprimatur of legitimacy that comes with being a vice presidential candidate that's going to be on the ballot, it'll allow me to reach more and more people with what I perceive to be our message of sound money, non-intervention, things of that nature. And I think that it's very important that more people hear that. The Ron Paul revolution is what inspired me, even though I was a libertarian before that because of my dad, but it's what inspired me to believe that our ideas have, an audience. There's a thirst amongst some aspect of civilization. And my hope is that with this run, I can reach millions more than I have already reached over the past few years. And we'll see. Let's add more troops to our ranks is kind of the end goal here.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah, dude. Thank you again. Are there any last things, anything you want to point people to? I mean, we already kind of talked about the podcast and everything, but to go through the list just for anybody and for the AI that's going to write down my list of links for me.
All right, perfect. No, that's how cool.
No, it's fucking great. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's
so amazing. Yeah.
At Liberty Lock Pod on X. If anybody wants to support my work, you can subscribe there. I'll follow you back. Liberty Lockdown's the show. I'm back on YouTube. Just released an episode after a month hiatus of my suspension. So please go help out with the algorithms. It was released at midnight last night because it took me a long time to do post-production. But Liberty Lockdown on YouTube, Liberty Lockdown on Rumble. I also do a completely racist and retarded comedy show called Tower Gang, which you should not watch. And I do the best political show called We Are Change is the name of the channel on Rumble. It's myself, Luke Radowski, and Steph. We basically, as I said earlier, we do Timcast IRL, Miami style. We have people in studio. We go live 3 nights a week, usually 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And we've had incredible guests, and I think that people would enjoy it if they check that out. So that's everything, man. And continued success to you. Congrats on fatherhood. We didn't even get a chance to talk about that, but I don't think you and I have spoke, or maybe we spoke once after, right after the birth of your son. So, that's
it's almost 2 now. He's almost
It's been that
2.
long?
It's been that long, man.
Jesus. All right. Well, I take it back. We've definitely talked since then, but, I think that's, setting aside all of the finance and the political and all that, like that's what makes life worth living. And I'm sure you're enjoying that process. And I even with the sleepless nights, it's a beautiful thing that you're doing, man.
Dude, yeah, appreciate that. It's funny, like your little rant or whatever about like, doing it for the next generation and for your kids, even though you don't have them. Like, it's amazing how much harder that shit hits. Like you don't think like I can't watch like dumb shows that like pull on those strings. I just become a blubbering mess. and that shit hits us so hard. And I think you're going to go back like when you do have kids, it's going to be funny how much more, like when you think about those, like the fact that you have that perspective now is awesome. And I absolutely love it. And I think you're going to be like kind of blown away by how much how much more impact all of those things have, because you're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh no, this is it. Like I just realized, like it's the most important thing I'll do. Like of every like literally nothing else matters. Like it's the whole purpose, the whole frame of reference now for everything I do. And it's like people talk about, you become parents and you don't get to go out and drink and stuff anymore. And it's like, no, like I think you just kind of like at least I just stopped. Like that stuff is just like lower on my, like I don't care anymore. Like my son is just like higher on the list. I just want to do things with my family. And I realize my kids are my only real legacy. Like Bitcoin Audible is going to be forgotten in how long? Nobody's going to host it in 30 years or whatever. Like,
Nope. It's going to live on the blockchain forever, guy. You're going to be eternal through Bitcoin Audible.
Oh shit. But yeah, I love it. Thank you, dude. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Such an awesome conversation. And do not, if you are not following Clint, if you're not checking out Liberty Lockdown, if you haven't seen him on Tim, with Luke, anything, all of the stuff that he does, please stop being a sad little bitch and follow him and all of the things. The notes, the links will be in the show notes. My AI and producer together will make sure that all happens. So check it out. There's links, stuff right down in there in the show notes. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this out. We're still building the YouTube. Like we still don't have much following on the YouTube channel. So if you have not checked that out yet, or you haven't subscribed and you haven't shared it out, share it with people that you know. That's how we build this thing out with YouTube. So check that out. The link will be there in the show notes if you're listening to this in audio. And of course, check out our amazing sponsors, Swan Bitcoin and CoinKite, the makers of the Cold Card hardware wallet. That's how you're going to get your Bitcoin, and that's how you're going to keep that shit safe. That's why I like having them as sponsors, because they're services I use and have been for a very, very long time. And it's the 1-2 punch of the easiest way to be a secure, long-term Bitcoiner with no noise, no nonsense. Just go check them out. Links are right there. All right, man. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Bitcoin Audible. Until then, everybody, take it easy, guys.